Hello. So we're going to go through this video here. Let me just show you this. I'm going to run through this, then we're just going to do like a breakdown of how I made the sounds and how I've like mixed it all and stuff like that. But first, here's the video. Amazing. Right, okay, here we go. So I'm going to dock this over here so we can see it. Can probably get rid of most of this stuff. Right, so we've got delay, reverb, and main. Let's just go through the main stuff now. I've kind of laid it out so it goes like diagonal, just so it's easier to understand what's going on. So I'll solo a few things and we'll just run through it. So a lot of the source here was actually made using Silo. So I'll just show you that now. So here's the source. It's nothing fancy. It's just like mechanical clicks and then bassy sounds and stuff like that. The idea behind it was to get like very reverby stuff and very dry stuff and different textures, kind of mix and match basically. But here's like some of the source. It's nothing fancy. I'll kind of mess around with this as it goes. This might be a bit loud. Let me turn it down. So you get these weird kind of sounds. So that's so that's how I've done that. So there's not much going on. We got biome here, which is kind of cool. I don't actually think I used it. I think it maybe a little bit of saturation, not much. Let's just bypass that. EQ, nothing going on there. D-click, that's quite interesting. It's worth messing around with that. And then we've got D-reverb. This is the kind of the thing I use on all the sounds I make, basically. It can be quite interesting to automate this. So we just go here, audio control signal, channel 1 and 2. Then you can see that just goes up and down. We can adjust the attack and release in strength. You probably don't want it at 100, but that's like a good general tip. I would always try and do that. If you don't have RX, because it is quite expensive, you can probably just use waves, Z noise or X noise or just anything, any D noise or D reverb. So yeah, I'll bypass these for now. And then we've got all pass phase. This is just a free plugin. I'll show you what this does. Let me bring in a sound here and I'll just show you because it might not be super obvious on these. So it tends to only work on like impacts and very transient stuff. So let's see. Let's try it on this. So I'll bring this to a new channel here. Open this up. Right. So here it is without the effects. Then here it is with. You see it just adds like a bit of like tonal content to it basically. You don't want to do too much because you can easily overdo it. I normally just keep it kind of like that. The one thing I never touch is this mix thing because like listen to this. It just sounds a bit weird. So what I would maybe do is just bring the intensity down a little bit. This is very similar to a plugin by Kilohertz called Disperser, which if you've got Disperser you probably don't need this. But yeah, this is pretty good. So then let's have a look at this. So we've got the effects here. Nothing fancy, Oxford Inflator. I use this mono bass thing quite a lot. Basically on everything. I just put it on the group track. And it just sums everything below 150 to mono, basically. Nothing fancy. And then we've got Filter Freak. Yeah, I don't know if it's doing all that much, really, but But yeah, a lot of these things, they don't do much by themselves. Like Oxford and Flitter, you can probably take that off. It's not doing much. But just combined, they all add up. And it sounds kind of decent in the end. So yeah, for the source here, this is all my own stuff. But the idea was like tonal stuff and then transient stuff. So stuff like that. And then combine this. And then that, and then nothing fancy at all. A big thing to like focus on is what's mono and what's stereo. I think over the past year, that's one of the biggest things that's like improved my sound design, is just making sure if it doesn't need to be stereo, you know, I make it mono basically. So yeah, we've got this. Enable all these. And then of course you've got silo at the end of the chain, but you can mess about with it, put it wherever you want. You know, try a few different things. I basically just brought in a bunch of stuff from my library. So let's say this, and then just messed about with it. And then you get some weird results. And then after that, I bounced it all down. So we can mute that. And then we've got all these stems here. So yeah, a lot of weird stuff, and then I just bounced it all down. And then made a library out of that. And then it was basically just a case of putting like mix and match and just seeing what actually works. So that's most of the source. I think there's maybe a few other things I used. Plastic hits. I actually use some of these things quite a lot. These are just explosions. So what these do, I mean, you don't need to look at it as an explosion, just look at it as more of like a transient. So I would just bring this in here, crop this, sum this to mono, because it doesn't need to be stereo. Then put it like here. Now it sounds different here because it's in this group, which is main. This is all the main sound effects. And I always take the bass out of this. If it doesn't need to have bass, just take the bass out of it, basically. So yeah, we would just bring this in here. And then you could just go to the stuff I bounced down, which is all this. So that sounds kind of cool, right? So just bring this in. Does it need to be stereo? Well, this is mono. This is stereo, this is mono. So it could be quite nice to have a lead in that's in stereo, and then a mono hit, then some other stuff that's stereo. But always try it in mono. So, in fact, I'll keep that there. What I'll do is I'll just turn off all the effects. Yep, sounds decent. So yeah, so just these things, some like watery textures. High pitched stuff. It's easy to just add loads of bassy hits and stuff, but you do need the contrast of like the high end. And then for some of the smaller details, I used EMF sounds. Well, it's definitely worth having a library of just EMF stuff because it's so useful. Stuff like this. But yeah, it's nice for those little details. I've also used some stuff from the Neutron, the Behringer Neutron. So I basically just like make libraries full of like random source. So let's have a look at the Neutron one. And then I just pick and choose. I just go through them and think, I need a tonal bit for like a tonal sound for this. So I might pull something from here or here. Of course, you can just buy sample libraries, and that kind of helps, especially when you're starting out. But I normally just use my own samples for. I think this design is like 99% my own stuff. Yeah. Yeah. So there's nothing too difficult going on here. It's just collecting little snippets of sound and then layering them up, basically. Stuff like that. Now you want to make sure it's tight to the animation. You don't want it to be like too long, otherwise it can just sound a bit of a mess. So yeah, it's all just stuff like that. Then we come to the chain here that I'm using. Nothing fancy. So I take the bass out of all this stuff. Oxford inflator. Nothing crazy going on there. All pass just a little bit. Denoise, de-reverb, Transx multi. So there's multiple transient shapers you could potentially use for this. There's Transgressor 2, which is quite good. There's Transx multi, which I've obviously used here. But then there's other things you could use, like let me bring it up. Native Instruments, Transient Master, and things like that. I find that these things, like Transient Master and SPL Transient Designer, they mainly just work on the big initial impact. So if I was doing an explosion sound, for example, I'd use this on the main hit, and then I'd probably chop it up, and then the tail would have Transx multi. This tends to deal with more like the little crackly transients a little bit better. So yeah, Transx multi, Pro L2, not doing very much. Mono bass, always. And then another EQ just at the end, just to take away some bass. I tend to not do anything per track. Maybe a little bit of reverb on some things, like this. This is just like a scream sound that I found, and I reversed it and added some reverb. Yeah, I think it sounds pretty cool. Yeah, tremolo on this. But generally nothing too much going on there. And then this whole main thing here, I think it gets sent to reverb. I think it gets sent to here, and then it's just a tiny little bit of reverb. Nothing crazy at all. Take the bass out of that. Yeah, nothing much to say about that. And then, this is one of the tricks, I don't know if you call it a trick, but this is what I've been doing recently, which is splitting up the main stuff to the sub-content. So then if we have a listen to this one. Yeah, so that's the sub. So sometimes in music production and things like that, people have the sub layer and it's just like, it's like EQ'd, so there's nothing above like 100 hertz. I kind of like all the high-end stuff in this. I think it sounds quite nice, so no reason not to keep it. So the first thing I do, and it might kind of seem silly, but I cut out like most of the bass here from 50 hertz. My speakers only go down to about 36 hertz, so they're not ideal. So I tend to not really know what's going on at this super low end range. So I just cut all this stuff here. And then we add one of these things here. This is really good, Analog Obsessions. It tends to always be a little bit much. So just be careful with like the volume of all the items and stuff like that when you're using it. Like you might want to actually bring down the clip gain. Or you could just bring down this, the dry wet, and that'll probably work quite well. Yeah, all pass phase. Yeah, sounds good. Oxford inflator, just a little bit of saturation there. Nothing too crazy. You don't want the bass to distort. You just want a little bit of saturation. And same again with this Saturn 2. It's kind of the same idea. Yeah, nothing fancy. Then we've got our bass. And if you look at that, it's at minus 24, so it's not doing anything. I always set it to 53, but then it's actually got this parameter modulation thing, which I always do when I'm using our bass. Because what's going to happen is it's going to make this bit here, it's going to boost the bass for this. But then if I just set this, I won't be able to move it, but if I just set this, it's always going to be 53 hertz, even for the tail. And it ends up really muddy. So you definitely don't want to do that. So just use the parameter modulation thing, adjust the release, and that helps keep the bass a little bit tighter. And then transient master, kind of the same thing, right? So we've got the bass that hits and then automates this. I want to emphasize the bass on the impact. So I bumped up the attack here and brought down the sustain. And then just added a compressor, G mono bass, and then L2 just to bring up the volume a little bit. A lot of this stuff's stereo. It probably doesn't need to be, but you know, it is what it is. Let's have a listen to this without the effects. So yeah, they add quite a lot. It's not like night and day, but it's just a little bit nicer. Then we go up here, and then this all gets sent through a master channel here with just L2 on it, and then a bit of EQ. Then it goes to this for some reason. What's this? Right, I don't know. But yeah, that's basically it. That's basically the whole thing. If there's anything specific you want me to go over, just let me know and I'll make another video, because it is just kind of like make a bunch of source, then just, you know, try and fit it in basically. Like, yeah, all this. So if I was doing this again, or I had to give advice on someone that was going to do something like this, I'd say just focus on the textures, you know, try and get some nice contrast with the tonal stuff, the transient stuff, the noise, the EMF, and then add some like reverb at certain points, just bump up the reverb. I think I've done that here. So yeah, just added a bit of reverb just to add some space to it basically. But yeah, I'll play it once more. Cool, hope that was useful. Cheers, bye.